Okay, thank you for joining us for this afternoon session, Charging Our Energy Future. With that, I will turn it over to Carolyn.
Great. Thank you so much, Brenda. Thank you so much to the EPA for having us today. I'm just going to pull up some slides, so bear with me for one moment. This is where Robin should tell a joke. Do you have a good joke, Robin? No. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I'm Carolyn Sarno Goldthwaite with Clearly Energy, and I'm joined today by Robin, Blakeman, and Terry Hollandsworth from Energy Efficient West Virginia. So you're going to be hearing from all three of us today about a project that we are undertaking with funding from the U.S. Department of Energy. So before we dive in, we want to make sure that we make this as interactive as possible and really engaging for all of you. We're sorry that we're all not sitting face to face, but we're glad that we can at least be here today in this virtual setting. So what we'd like to know is just a little bit about where you're from. It's a little bit easier when you're in person at a conference to kind of get to know a neighbor or get to know folks when you're in the coffee line. So let's all pretend we're in a virtual coffee line right now, and we'd love to have you just chat in where you're from and maybe what you're hoping to get out of this session. I know, like many of you, you see the descriptions and then you think it might be about one session, or you really have something in your mind. So feel free, we'll just take a moment to have folks chat in where you're from and what you're hoping to get out of this session. And while folks do that, I'll just explain a little bit more about Clearly Energy. So Clearly Energy is a climate software company. We're a small woman-owned business, and we are the prime on a U.S. Department of Energy Recce Award that you'll be hearing a little bit more about today. So thanks again for joining. All right, so thanks. We've got PA, solar roof info, Bay Area. Thanks for joining from the Bay Area. I know we've got folks that are really joining in from all over the place. Pittsburgh. Let's see, so keep chatting in. Hopefully you get to make connections and see folks' names that you are familiar with. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit today about benchmarking and building performance standards, a new Department of Energy funded project, something called cohorts, which you may or may not be familiar with, and a little project spotlight on the lovely state of West Virginia, as well as some resources. So before we dive in, and I know folks are already busy, thank you so much for chatting in where you're from and what you're hoping to learn. When you hear the word building performance standards, or maybe even benchmarking, a benchmarking policy, what comes to mind for you? Does a location come to mind, or is it like, ugh, what is that? Or that's not possible. But if I say building performance standards, does that ring a bell for anybody? Or what do you immediately think of? So feel free to chat in. More efficient building stock, data, lead. Let's see. Excellent. Any jurisdictions come to mind? Philadelphia area. All right, let's see. Any, or that might be where you're from. Sorry about that. What West Virginia can't do. All right, DC, excellent. Yeah, a lot of times when you hear building performance standards, you immediately think, or folks immediately think of New York City, Washington, DC, the state of Colorado, or Denver, Colorado, Cambridge, Massachusetts. But you may not necessarily think of Smithers, West Virginia, population of 751. So I don't want to steal Robin's thunder, but Robin is going to take you on a lovely tour of the state of West Virginia. And just a shameless plug that the Mayor Ann Cavalier of West Virginia would love everybody to come visit. But what we want to talk to you a little bit more about today is the fact that, and what we hope you get out of this presentation, is that benchmarking and building performance standards are for everyone, regardless of the size of the jurisdiction. They really can be achievable for even smaller and resource constraint jurisdictions. So that's what we're going to talk to you a little bit about today. So just setting some ground rules, or really foundational about what policies are. When we're talking about this particular project, what we're talking about first might be benchmarking. If you're familiar with the benchmarking policy that jurisdictions have passed over the last several years, 10 years or so, from Portland, Maine to San Diego, California, and many states and jurisdictions and counties in between, including Philadelphia, it's measuring a building's efficiency by comparing it to a similar size. And so in a benchmarking policy, you're taking your buildings and you're reporting back to that city or to that town on an annual basis using most often Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So that's kind of where things got started. But in recent years, many jurisdictions are moving forward with outcome-based policies, or what we refer to as building performance standards. So building performance standards are a little bit more, I don't want to say complicated, definitely a little more challenging, but definitely have a lot more benefit when you think about how to improve the efficiency of the building stock. So a building performance standard policy improves the building's efficiency over time. And so, and I hope nobody can hear my dog is barking very loudly right now. Robin and I like to talk about our dogs barking every time we get together. But what the difference between the benchmarking, which sets that target over time, the building performance standards is, as I said, an outcome-based policy. And that outcome-based policy sets a particular target. It might be an EUI or a greenhouse gas emissions target over time. And mostly, as we said, and you all chimed in, Washington, D.C., again, is a prime example. It was the first jurisdiction to pass a building performance standard policy. It's traditionally been for large commercial and multifamily buildings, but perhaps not for Smithers, West Virginia, or some other smaller communities across the country. But we want to challenge that and say that it is possible for others to actually adopt. And it is possible because it's happening not only at the federal government side of things, it's happening with private organizations, and it's also happening with cities and towns across the country. So so this is just a little bit more on the benefits of why the federal government has adopted federal building performance standard policies, why jurisdictions are looking to adopt a policy. There's environmental benefits. It helps to track and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Healthier buildings. There are many studies that have been shown that healthier buildings, buildings that reduce their energy consumption, create healthier buildings, better indoor environmental quality, better indoor air quality, and then it actually links to higher productivity the more efficient those buildings are. Equity. So unfortunately, in some of the early adopters from adopting benchmarking policies, it tend to have been led by large commercial property developers, not necessarily taking into account community-based organizations or the effect that large commercial buildings have, or buildings in general, their building emissions have on their neighbors. And particularly, it tends to happen to LMI population, low moderate income population. And so what we're trying to do is to make sure that we're evening out and not putting any undue burden, any undue health consequences from the emissions from these large portfolio buildings to residents that happen to live in those same jurisdictions, in those same cities. And then job creation. These policies have been shown to increase the demand for well-paying jobs, being able to electrify or retrofit those buildings. So there's many different values of why folks want to enact these policies. Somebody early on in the chat wrote down data. And I give a thumbs up and applause to that, because data is key. Data is so important to be able to manage and track our policies and our goals, and that is in part what we are doing. Now, all of this sounds great, and you're probably all thinking, great, Carolyn, sign me up. Or maybe what I just said takes your breath away. And if you represent a jurisdiction, a community, a city, and you are, or maybe you're on a sustainability task force, or somebody, said they're working on solar, and you're thinking, how does all this fit together? Or I don't have the time or the resources to implement one of these policies. It all sounds great. Well, this is where this project came to light. And so, as I mentioned, Clearly Energy is the prime recipient from the Department of Energy. And on the screen that you see here are a number of our project partners. And I can't echo this enough. While we're focusing on West Virginia today, you will see shortly a map that illustrates our other project partners where cohorts are taking place, where you can get engaged, ask questions, and get the technical support that you need to help implement some of these policies. So I'm going to tell you a little bit before I hand it off to Robin about our federally funded project, where we are collaborating not only with the Department of Energy and some of the national labs, but also with the EPA. We are engaged with some of the folks in the EPA for Energy Star Portfolio Manager, helping to align efforts and resources. So the first part is around technical assistance and increasing administrative capacity. I used to be I'll call myself a reform facilities manager. I used to work for a jurisdiction in Massachusetts. And I know what it's like to have things just continue to pile up, and you want to do a policy, you want to implement something new, but at the same time, I had 85 public buildings that I had to keep track of and had to retrofit, and 22 of them were school buildings. And so a lot of these policies seem like a great idea, but I know that sometimes it's hard to take that step forward if you don't have administrative capacity. So part of what we're doing with this project and with a regional cohort is to increase administrative capacity by creating jobs such as a shared energy analyst, which will help a jurisdiction across jurisdiction line, like a shared energy manager, to help either develop a policy and or implement it. And the flip side is, if you're a building owner, what do these policies mean for me? How do I retrofit my building? Then we're implementing a building performance standard circuit rider. And Robin can touch on a little bit about that, about what their plans are in West Virginia. But we're bringing folks together in cohorts across the country. So first one that we'll talk about today is the one for West Virginia. So peers will come together. They'll talk about I want to say my frustrations, might be theirs. They'll talk about their frustrations, right? What do they need to enact and pass these policies? Now, you don't think of West Virginia and building performance standards, but some of the folks there do, and they know that that's a long runway. And so what we're starting with in West Virginia is more in the lead by example, and that's okay, because you have to start somewhere, and that is really the foundation for this project that we're working on. How do we lead by example? How do we make sure that we're bringing all stakeholders and meeting them where they're at? And so if they're going to do lead by example, ultimately towards benchmarking and a building performance standard policy, that's okay. And I'll just hit on two other pieces, which is innovative funding models. Policies are important, but we all know there's also a cost to implementing a policy. There is a cost, obviously, to energy efficiency, but there's many great rewards, as I showed on the previous slide. So one of the pieces that we're working on is innovative funding models, looking at something called utility attribution, so that maybe we can get the utilities on board to help borrowing from, if you're ever in the energy code space, a lot of utilities, not all, get to claim savings for supporting energy code adoption. We'd be following the same model, but for building performance standards or for benchmarking activities. And we're looking at a host of other things, but basically know that we're looking for long-term funding models that can be implemented post the federal support that we are receiving. And then lastly, those that are involved in the cohorts will get access to software. I work for a climate software company, so we'll give access to folks to our building energy analysis manager platform or the SEED platform to help implement those policies in the most equitable and efficient manner. And I'll just say that we like to say that spreadsheets have a time and a place, but it's not for managing a benchmarking or building performance standard policy. And I see there's one question in the chat, which I will get to in just one second. And before I hand it off to Robin, but I just wanted to note, this is where current cohorts are taking place across the country. If you are located, I know that for EPA Region 3, it encompasses not only West Virginia and Pennsylvania and Maryland. So we have a Maryland cohort. Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission is doing a cohort in Pennsylvania, and Robin is leading the one in West Virginia. If you are outside of that region, our partners at MEA and at NEEP in the Northeast are also running cohorts there. So you can get in touch with me. We'll have my email address at the end of the slides if you want to connect with folks. And if there's not a cohort in your state or where you are, let me know that too, because we will be adding more cohorts in budget period 2. So I'm going to pass it off to Robin, and I'm going to just answer one question that I saw, important distinction question that came in, which is, what is considered a small community? That is a great question. So initially we were aligning small, the definition of small, with the census definition, which was, I think, around 11 or 12,000, but we've since, through the Department of Energy, been able to give some latitude for what the definition is of small. So all we would just say is that if you need help and you're interested, just let us know and we will match you up with one of our project partners. So I'm going to pause there and I'm going to turn it over to Robin and then we'll circle back. Daniel, I see your question in the chat. So we will, after Robin and Terry go, we'll circle back to questions. So Robin, are you ready?
Yes, thanks, Carolyn. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I am the director of Energy Efficient West Virginia, which is a small nonprofit, and we are glad to work with Clearly Energy and the other partners in this DOE RECI project to try to bring some greater adoption of energy efficiency practices to West Virginia municipalities. And we are going to show you some model small communities here in just a minute. First of all, I want to show you one of the most beautiful places in the state. Carolyn, if you can advance to the next slide that has Kanawha Falls there. This is Kanawha Falls. Like I said, this beautiful place demonstrates both the challenges and potentials of our state. If you look to the left side of the picture, you will note a building partially in the river. Since about 1900, the falls have been augmented by a low dam along the crest. Hydroelectric power has been generated there for more than a century by Union Carbide Company and its predecessors and successors, according to West Virginia Encyclopedia. The electricity is used mainly in the production of metal alloys at nearby company facilities, however. The fact that this facility has never powered nearby homes and small businesses can largely be attributed to the dominance of the coal industry in supplying West Virginia's electricity plants and grid with power. This power is becoming increasingly expensive as our two major energy providers, AEP and First Energy Mon Power, seek to pass on the increased costs of burning coal and maintaining our antiquated power grid to customers. Thus, EEWV's mission is to advance energy efficiency and renewable energy practices to provide greater independence and cost control to our residents, municipalities, and small business owners. Next slide, please. So why do this work in West Virginia? There are great challenges, I'll admit that, but there's also great need for the benefits of energy efficiency adoption. We have powered the country's industrial processes for almost 200 years. Yet we have widespread poverty, poorly insulated buildings, and dramatically rising utility costs to show for it. Many residents report that their electric bills are now at an average of $400 to $500 a month. Many bankruptcy cases in West Virginia are reportedly due to those rates. Some of our newer homes are less well insulated than older building stock because building performance standards have not kept up with the times. Of course, there are exceptions to these generalities, but overall, we desperately need solutions that will empower property owners and municipal leaders to take control of their facility costs. The potential is here. Through IRA benefits and newly announced programs, such as the Appalachian Community Capital Fund's Green Bank for Appalachia, we know that there are financial incentives for doing this work to our municipal leaders, nonprofits, and property owners. The time is therefore right for this program due to all of the above and the great need for the local jobs and economic development that can result from such programs. We are thankful to Clearly Energy and the Department of Energy for providing tools and technical assistance for this project to take place in West Virginia. And as Carolyn mentioned, we've already hired 2 people to help with this project. One is an outreach coordinator and the other is in training to become our circuit rider energy analyst. Next slide, please. Here you can see another perspective on our great need for energy efficiency improvements. West Virginia was ranked 44th during the most recent, that's 2022, American Council for Energy Efficient Economies scorecard ratings of all states on their energy efficiency practices. Next slide. Here we see, however, some hope. Thanks to the Ohio River Valley Institute, or ORVI, we find a tale of two counties that illustrate the potential for that energy efficiency as an economic driver in our region could play. The top line, the red one, is Belmont County, Ohio. The bottom is in blue is Lewis County, Washington, or Washington State. Lewis County, Washington is home to Centralia, a town that, when faced with closing of a coal mine and a coal-fired power plant, chose to engage in widespread energy monitoring and planning for energy efficiency upgrades. You can see the results on this graph in terms of economic growth in Centralia, Lewis County, and economic decline in Belmont County, Ohio, which put their hopes in a cracker plant being developed in their community, and that plan was recently scrapped. Next slide, please. Here's some more information from ORVI on the Centralia project, and you can see a picture of their resource that has been developed related to that project. This is a North Star model for us. We can see the potential of energy efficiency upgrades to transition very fragile mono-economy places to healthy, growing, and increasingly diverse economically driven places. This transformation was sparked by $55 million in grant funds and some very good energy monitoring and planning on the part of municipal leaders. And so that is the core of what we need. In the wake of the announced closings of the town's biggest employer, a coal-fired power plant, Centralia got busy and instituted a lot of energy efficiency measures. After 4 years of working together on this project, that community noted the following positive results. Their GDP grew at twice the national rate. After trailing the nation in job creation for a decade, Centralia added jobs at nearly twice the national rate, more than 2,800 new jobs in all. Wages rose almost 50% faster than the national average, and the population of that town grew faster than the national average as well. So the next slide, please. The economic multipliers noted here can be applied in any community that adopts widespread energy monitoring or benchmarking and plans for much needed energy upgrades. From Sean O'Leary, ORVI's senior researcher, an update on research and applications of the Centralia model can be heard. And I'll summarize what he has said is happening now, in that Ohio State University's economic department is doing a full quantitative analysis of Centralia's pre and post transition programs, and they found that that would be applicable to communities within the Ohio Valley region. Also, Centralia's was presented as a model for effective economic transition for fossil fuel communities at last winter's COP28 conference in Dubai by the US government and the Net Zero World Project. 4 weeks ago, Ohio and Marshall counties in West Virginia, along with the cities of Wheeling and Moundsville, applied for a $35 million EPA climate pollution reduction grant for the purpose of implementing the Centralia model in that part of the state, which is the Northern Panhandle. Next slide, please. So we are hoping to follow this model too, down in the more southerly part of the state. Our target region is that of the upper and middle region of the Kanawha River Valley, from Nitro to Smithers and Montgomery. Nitro is on the border of Kanawha and Putnam County, and Smithers and Montgomery are towns on the eastern side of Kanawha County, bordering Fayette County. Next slide. So I want to take you on a little trip on the river to catch a glimpse of these communities. You'll see a little riverboat in this picture, if you can imagine climbing aboard that and going upstream. This is starting in Nitro, West Virginia. That's a picture from the banks in Nitro. Nitro is a town of 6,618. And Nitro was named for nitroglycerin because that was the place where that chemical was first developed. So it is a chemical town, and we are hoping that they will adopt some major energy efficiency upgrades. They've already committed to being part of our cohort. The next stop is Charleston. Charleston is our capital city in West Virginia, and it was the first city in the state to adopt a target ordinance for energy benchmarking and energy efficiency upgrades in their city-owned buildings. The benchmarking has taken place in, I believe, 19 of the buildings so far, and thus they are ready to move into analytical and planning phases for energy efficiency upgrades. Fun fact, Charleston is still considered a rural place, even though it is the largest city in the state by REAP. Next stop on this adventure up the river is Marmet. Marmet is essentially a suburb of Charleston. It's very close to Charleston, the eastern side, but it has its own character and heritage as an important river and manufacturing town. Many of the towns that are within our target region have coal mining and/or coal transport with associated chemical production in their economic and social DNA. In this picture, we see one of the most important lock and dam systems on the Kanawha River at Marmet. There is also a large chemical plant in Marmet. Towns like this have contributed heavily to the industrial development of our country. It is high time for them to reap some benefits of technology and funding that can turn their lagging economies around. The next slide. And here I want to bring Terry Hollandsworth, who is the EEWV board chairperson and the West Virginia ASHRAE chapter president-elect, into the conversation. Terry worked with many of the Kanawha County school systems to do benchmarking projects, and he is, I believe, especially proud of Riverside High School here in Bell, West Virginia, another town on the Kanawha River, for what they've done with that school. So I'm going to let Terry tell you more about that at this point in time.
Yeah, I have to ask the question to everybody here is, do you know what your school systems or local districts are using in energy? Do they know what they're using in energy, or are they just keeping track of what the bill was last month and see if it would increase this month or did it decrease this month, or are they only keeping track of it a short picture of time? So we'll talk a little bit about Riverside here. It had a huge rooftop units on there that were 53 feet long, and there was 4 of them. They sat there and they made heat and air conditioning on both ends of the unit 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they had what's called a dual duct system. So they brought in the heat and the cooling to every classroom, and there was dampers that would open and close to allow heat in or the cooling in to maintain classroom temperature. Needless to say, it didn't work very well. So the school suffered through this for 19, 20 years before they finally got an opportunity to upgrade. So they realized that their energy usage was high. They, through benchmarking, they were able to hire an engineering firm to come in and take a look and make recommendations on what they could do. First thing they did was put in a geothermal heat pump system and replace all the units within the classroom has their own water source heat pump. So every classroom has its own one. So if a unit goes down, it only affects one classroom, not a whole wing. Their Energy Star rating right now is 80 since they installed this system. So they put in 200 wells, 400 feet deep into the ground. At 100 feet, they hit groundwater, which actually is beneficial for it. The water is circulated through those radiators stuck down in the ground of the wells through piping, and it heat transfers. So that water stays at a constant 60 degrees. And it's traveled or pumped through the building and all those water source heat pumps. And they're able to take heat out of the room and put it into the water to be carried away, or they take heat out of the water and put it into the room to warm the room up. So previously they had gas heat, air conditioning, electric air conditioning, the dual duct system. They were using a considerable amount of money a year just to pay for their energy usage. What the benchmarking allowed them to do to hire the engineer to come in, and they installed this new system. As you can see on the index for intensity, and that's saving $240,000 a year. So, and the geothermal system will last 15, 20 years easy. Some other systems in the state of West Virginia have done very well. Barber County and Berkeley County both have an energy utilization intensity of 29. You get to in energy utilization, the lower the number, the better. It's kind of like the gas mileage on your car. Instead of getting 12 miles to the gallon is a good thing, or 20 miles to the gallon is a good thing, or 30 miles to the gallon is even a better thing. So the lower the number is, the better. So 20 EUI is considering getting very close to net zero and net zero energy usage. So there's when you step into using solar panels or wind power or some other kind of power generation that you can do on site to save you, get your energy usage down to even less. One very successful county, Upshur County, they had an EUI of 72.9 in 2000.
Terry, I think we're losing you a little bit. You're cutting out.
Savings of two. All right, am I having bandwidth problems?
Yeah, you're cutting out a little bit.
So-
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So Clay County, Lincoln County, Kanawha County, Riverside is located, is for the entire county, their EUI is about 61. And Kanawha County has 70 schools, 69 schools. So it's an opportunity there by identifying where our EUI is, conserving electricity and electric usage. Then we reduce the pressure we put on the transmission lines, and then we reduce the pressure of having to create new energy. So
Great.
somebody already.
Yeah, well, thank you for that piece. Really important to show why benchmarking is helpful and important to get started with this energy transition. And I'm going to turn it back over to Robin to finish on Smithers before we wrap up for some questions. Robin?
Yeah, so one more stop on our tour of the Kanawha River. This is the towns of Smithers and Montgomery. They're located across the river from each other, adjacent, joined by a bridge that crosses the river. City leaders of these two towns have already done a lot of planning for revitalization of the two communities based on tourism and becoming leaders in projects that will provide lower cost and higher living standards for their residents and city-owned buildings. They are poised to become an important example to the whole state in terms of economic and energy transition. And indeed, that's what our vision for the entirety of this cohort project is, that we will provide beneficial examples and motivational information for the rest of the state and region for engagement in energy efficiency and renewable energy-based economic and social transitions. And so we thank you, and I'm going to turn it back over to Carolyn at this point.
Yeah, thank you so much for that river tour. Remember, Mayor Ann Cavalier from Smithers, who's been hit with, as she calls it, one economic tsunami after another, is trying to rebrand and repurpose and make it a destination community. So not only for people to come hiking and biking and kayaking and using the rivers, but really focusing and understanding that they need to improve the efficiency of their building stock that are there. Some of it, unfortunately, sitting vacant, or understanding the fact that she told us last week that unfortunately the folks, many people moved out of Smithers, and unfortunately the ones that remained are those that couldn't afford to leave. And so this is where it's tremendously important that we are not only improving the efficiency and the health and the vitality of the buildings in the community of Smithers and surrounding ones as well. So I just wanted to highlight, and thank you again, Robin, for the tour. Now I want to go up and down the Kanawha River. Robin and I are going to end up on a road trip, and I hope you all will too. You know, if you're feeling a little like maybe your breath is taken away, or maybe I hope you're feeling very excited and enthused on what you heard, I wanted to highlight our project partners that are on the screen. There are many resources that they have that are available, in addition to the technical assistance that we're able to offer as part of this U.S. Department of Energy federally funded project. They have technical assistance. So if it doesn't fit in the confines of this project, there is other technical assistance that you can take advantage of from the U.S. Department of Energy, as well as through the EPA. The EPA has a number of resources that are available to get you started on using Portfolio Manager, learning how to benchmark your buildings. So we encourage you to visit the links that you see on the screen, as well as the bottom link, the Center for Building Performance Standards, which was also funded by the Department of Energy through a different federally funded project that Clearly Energy had. And so I'm going to pop back up and answer well, they're all important questions, but Daniel, you had asked the question about building performance benchmarking and what do you do with the numbers, and a question that your township commissioners are giving to you. And that is a question that, you know, many communities get asked, like, why are we doing this? And I think people kind of understand it. And part of it comes down to data, having access to that data. So that you can be able to plan effectively, not only your energy policies, but helping to understand and identify needs. You can do it, as Terry explained, from the school district perspective, leading by example, understanding what your baselines are so that you know where you need to prioritize your dollars, your limited capital, to improve the efficiency of the building stock. You can also use it as a way to help, like Mayor Cavalier understands, helping the building owners that are there to reduce their bottom line and to make their buildings more efficient, to figure out and braid together different funding opportunities that are out there, different resources. There are green banks. There's, you know, there's different incentives that are out there. In some states, they're not all, I recognize on this call, funding from utilities. So part of that, you know, just basically understanding, like, what do you do with those numbers? It's never to shame anybody, but it's really more as a helpful mark to figure out where do we go from here. So we'd be happy to have a conversation. I'm not sure where you're from, if you're in Pennsylvania, perhaps, but we'd be happy to connect you with some of our partners to make sure that this fits for you. So yeah, so if you, thank you, Brenda, for putting that in. If you have any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We have a couple more minutes to answer some questions for you. All right, so one question just came in. Has the difference in water usage for the school using geothermal heating been determined? So Terry, If you're still there, can you answer that question? Has the difference in water usage for the school using geothermal been determined?
The water is a closed loop system, so it stays inside the pipe the whole time, and it travels underground for the geothermal to transfer the heat back and forth. So water usage has not increased or decreased for the school. It's still the same whenever they wash their hands or flush the toilets or the case may be. All they've really done is effectively change the heating or the energy needed to heat and cool the building.
Great, thanks, Terry. And then just circling back, and I think I might have gotten this one earlier, but someone had asked just the definition of a small community. So again, this project is small, rural, and just us 40 tracks within a jurisdiction. And the definition of small is broad. So we originally started with the definition from the US Census, but DOE has given us the opportunity to expand upon what small means in order to help an even greater number of jurisdictions. So if you're questioning what small is, please reach out. What's most important is that we are providing the resources to help jurisdictions. And see, oh, and Robin, you chimed in. Do you want to explain, or I know you just put in a comment.
No, I don't need to explain. I just wanted to clarify that the geothermal water source is a different source from the public water sources.
Great. Any other? We'll do, let's see, do the building performance standards being recommended include guidelines for carbon emission reduction to reach 0 by 2050? Absolutely. So that is something as part of the project, we are going to work to help align jurisdictions, maybe neighboring ones, but that is 100% what would be included in helping to create a policy. What are the guidelines? What are the targets? Some set interim targets, 2030, 2035, 2050. There currently is not 2 building performance standard policies alike across the country. Some of them are modeled after Washington, D.C., and sometimes I question, is that a bad thing? Because it meets the needs and it's developed based on that jurisdiction. So that is something that would definitely be discussed, and support can be provided through the cohort. All right, there's another one that I just saw in here as we wrap up. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. How do you see biomass usage for clean energy in the future in the US? What main challenges and opportunities on the implementation side? Terry, do you want to take that question on biomass?
I'm not sure how to answer that.
Yeah.
I don't know that biomass would be considered a renewable energy. I don't know about clean energy. So they would have to put some kind of capture systems on there to capture the carbon that's being brought away from biomass. But anyway, there's many challenges there that's new. I'm not really up to date on it, so I cannot answer your question.
All right. All right, so as we're preparing to close up, I just want to give Robin and Terry, is there any last aha moment or something that you want to share with the audience? Anything that you wish you had mentioned? I know sometimes I walk away from a presentation, I'm like, I wish I had said this. Is there anything more you want to share with folks, or any ask that you have of them?
For me, I would ask anyone who is attending this session from West Virginia who might be interested in participating in our cohort, especially if you live in the Kanawha River region, to reach out to us. Once we establish this cohort in this limited area, we hope to expand it in year 2 or 3. So, please reach out to us through the contact information that Carolyn has provided there in that last screen.
Great. And Terry, any last remarks or comments you want to make for the group?
Yeah, as we move into electrification of our buildings to reduce energy usage, the first thing we have to do is conserve our energy. That will put less stress on the transmission lines to get energy to our buildings, and it'll put less stress on generation of energy so that we can bring in the wind and the solar types of energy sources or even hydrogen to help us get to where we need to be. But conserve first, then you can go in and see what you can do for your solar powered or wind powered to help you with your buildings. And it's just a matter of time. We're all going to be there. We're all working towards the same goal.
That's right. Very well said, and a good place to close. You got to eat your vegetables first before you can have your dessert. And that's the way I think of renewable energy. So we want to focus on efficiency first, and we'll all get there together. And that's why I think Robin and I originally came up with it takes a benchmarking village. It truly does take a village to pull together resources and work together to reduce the carbon emissions and create healthier, livable communities. So please reach out. That's our ask. Join us in this endeavor. We are just getting underway. And hopefully in future years, a future summit, we can come back and report back even more of the results. So thank you so much for choosing this session and for joining us today. And we hope you have a good rest of the summit. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn, for that wonderful moderating. And so I have on the screen a survey to complete. If this is the last session you'll be joining for this summit, there are sessions beginning at 3 p.m. if you're continuing with us throughout the end of the day. But thank you again to all the speakers and for the participation from the audience. And please complete this survey if it is your last survey. See you at a 3 o'clock session if you are staying with us.